Hi, and welcome back to the KITE Free Python course. My name is Arman Shah, president of KITE, and today we're going to finish learning about tuples, and more specifically, we're going to go over a certain exercise, a familiar exercise, again, that romeo.txt file, using tuples to count the most common word. So we're going to find the most common word in the file. This file will be linked to the description of the video. So I have the file opened up on my replit over here, as you can see, and again, this file has exclamation marks, commas, capital letters, and Python won't recognize these values as different strings. So for example, this Romeo with the comma would be different as this Romeo with the exclamation mark, which would be different from these. So these are three different values according to Python, which is not good for counting the number of common words, and especially finding the most common word, because it's going to register, Python's going to register each word is different, and that's not going to be beneficial for our program, which is finding the most common / the count of the words. So if you remember, we actually kind of did this and solved this problem in a previous video. So we're going to kind of reuse the example. I want to reuse it from scratch, but we're going to use the translate method to fix that. If you remember how it is, then great. If you don't, maybe check the previous video in dictionaries on how we advanced dictionaries on how we combated this issue. But we're going to get straight in. So what we're going to do is we're going to open the file, and you could actually use an input if you wanted. Right now we're not going to use an input. We're going to just open the file from how it is. If you wanted, you could kind of use this with multiple files, with any or almost any text file, I should say. But to do that, you're going to have to put an input statement and then a try and accept. But just to save time, we're just going to use this one program just for this file. So I'm going to open that file. Now I'm also going to make a count. I'm going to set the count equal to a dictionary, an open dictionary. So again, you could do DICT like that, or you could just have an open bracket like that, which is more concise. For the sake, I'm just put a dictionary just so I can see it. Now I'm going to say for line in file, and we're going to I don't know what that was. So I'm going to say for line in file, print line, just so we can see what the line looks like. So again, this is the file we saw. And what did I do? Oh, I spelled Romeo. No. Oh, I put text actually instead of txt. So this is what the file looks like. Again, these Romeos and everything else is not they're the same, they're different strings. So what we have to do first, I think the most obvious thing we should do is actually lowercase everything, because this is all caps, which is not great. So I'm going to say line equals line dot lower. So it's going to lowercase each line. So everything's lowercase now. And I'm also going to do line dot r strip, just to strip the white space from lines. And the last thing we must do is actually get rid of the punctuation marks, like the question marks, commas, etc. So we learned the translate method in the previous video. And what this does, it either switches strings with one or another, like you could switch certain strings with another, or you could even just delete strings entirely out of a string. So it's the line.translate, and then it takes the argument it takes is actually string.makeTrans. This is the same syntax as string.makeTrans, and that takes 3 arguments, which 2 of them we're going to leave blank. And the last one is actually going to be string.punctuation. So I went all this in that advanced dictionary parsing video. Make sure to check that out. An important thing we have to do is actually import string in the beginning of our Python code, so we can actually get that string to punctuation. This returns all the values of the strings, all the values of string punctuation, and it's beneficial because it will remove the exclamation marks, everything involved in punctuation, because the last argument that makeTrans takes in deletes. The last thing we're going to do is we're actually going to make this string into a list by saying words equals line.split. And what this will do, we'll simply just make a list of the words. Each string it will add a comma between and make a list. So if we were to print words, we would get this. So now, as you can see, nothing has any punctuation, everything's lowercase. So these values like Romeo and this Romeo will now be the same. And same thing with Juliet, and these A values, instead of being capitalized or getting confused with capitalization and punctuation, they'll be the same. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add these to our counts. So what we're going to do is actually use the get method. So for word in words, and you could use the get method, or you can use an if and else statement if word not in counts, and then add it. But we're going to use the get method because I feel like it's a little more challenging, but it's also something you would use and kind of understand better. So we're going to say counts of that word equals, and we're going to return. We can use the get method which returns a value. So we're going to say counts.get, and we're going to get that word default value 0, and we're going to add 1. So what this does is we're going to let's start from the beginning. Let's run this. Oh, let's print words. So what this does is, let's say it's going to go to the first word in each list, and it's going to see if counts has that. Alright, let's see if counts has that. No, it doesn't have it, so it's going to say the counts of that word to it with a default value of 0, but that value is added by 1, so technically the default value will be 1. And then it goes on, does that with the next one, until it gets to the same value again. Then eventually it's going to get to Romeo again. Now it's going to get Romeo, but listen, we already have Romeo. So then it's just going to add 1 to that value, making that value 2. So if we were to print counts at the end, now we get a count of all our values. Romeo equals 40, and then this is a count of every single word and how many times they appear. So that's beneficial and all, but that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for the most common word. So you could sit through all this and try to find the most common word, but another thing you could do is use tuples. And specifically, we're gonna make another for loop, and in that for loop, we're gonna try to pretty much append each of these using the counts.items to a tuple. So I'm gonna say, first I'm gonna create a list. List equals list. Now I'm gonna say for word, actually let's do, sorry, not word, key val and counts the items. So what this does is it's gonna find, remember, counts the items returns a list of tuples. So it will bracket each of these as a list, and we're gonna go through each of those items. So instead of doing this, I'm actually gonna say print count the items. Let's do that. Let's see. Oh, I gotta delete this for now. This is counts items. Oh, I forgot a little bit. All right. So again, we're gonna get that little header in the bin, but we can ignore that because it just returns a value. But what this does is we're gonna get a whole big list of tuples. Each of these are tuples that we can manipulate, and each of them has a key and value pair, which is important. So now, because we know as a key and value pair, we could keep 2 iteration variables as described before. And what are we going to do here? We're going to append list.append, which means add again, of val and then key. So we're going to do val and then key. And remember, it's really important to have 2 parentheses in here because we're appending 2 iteration variables. So we have to have a parentheses and parentheses. So a list, what we're going to have now, if we print the list, get rid of this, is we're going to have a list. Now we just pretty much took it out of the header, and we have just a list itself. We have it in the list, We have a list of each tuple pair. But now what can we do? Oh, and also an important thing we did is we put the val and key instead. The reason we put the val in front of the key is because we could actually use a sort function which will sort the first value in a tuple. Remember, the sort function will sort the first value in a tuple, or look and compare the first value in the tuple. So if we put the key and then value, and then we use a sort function, I'll show you what happens actually. Let's do that first. So at the end of the day, we are going to use a sort function, and I'll show you what happens when we do key val and then sort. So I'm going to say list.sort. So again, we put the key and then val first. We're actually going to get it. We're going to get an ABC order, which we don't want ABC order because we want number order. So that's why we have to put the val key first. Now if we sort that, we get it in number order, right? But we get it from lowest to highest, which is still pretty interesting. We could find the least common, but we want to find the most common. I mean, you could still use this to find the most common. These are the most common. I is the most common, as you can see by the bottom. But one other thing you could do is you could say dot sort, and you could say reverse, which is an argument taken in, equals true. Now if we do that, let's redo that. Scroll to the top, and we see that it's now doing an opposite sort method. So instead of doing it from lowest to greatest, doing from greatest to lowest by using that reverse argument taken in. And now we have the most common words, which are I and Romeo. So we've officially completed tuples and sequences in general in Python. We've learned strings, lists, and tuples, and of course dictionaries. But one thing we have to note is, how do we choose? I feel like dictionaries is easy when we choose dictionaries, but how do we choose strings, lists, and tuples over the other? So first of all, I feel like the biggest one is strings to choose over lists and tuples, because strings are, first of all, what you have to know, are immutable and very limited, because you can't really have a sequence of multiple strings. That's a list. You can only have a sequence of multiple characters. That's what a string is. They're not separated by commas. Lists and tuples, however, are separated by commas. And that's kind of hard to decide what to pick over the other. So you could use these common tips over here that I like to use to find out which ones you want to use. So one thing you want to know, obviously, are that lists are more commonly used than tuples because lists are mutable. And obviously tuples are immutable. So you might want to use a tuple over than a list in some contexts when you want to use a return statement. And also when you are involving with dictionary keys like the counts or a dictionary the items method, obviously use a tuple instead of a string. Also when you're passing a sequence as an argument to a function, you want to use tuples. Like how we passed 2 iteration values in a function as an argument, that was through a tuple, not a string. So these are the tuple exercises I would recommend doing. And thank you for joining us on this Python lecture. So we kind of have completed the basics of Python, so you're finally done. Now the only thing to learn are more modules and functions and more technologies within Python. But we finished the basic syntax and the syntax and code of Python in general. So if you have any questions, make sure to visit our Discord. So thank you for joining us in today's Python lecture, and congratulations, we actually finished the basics of Python. Most of Python, the basics are finished, and only thing left to learn are the more in-depth technologies and modules in Python, which we'll be learning in the next lectures. If you have any questions, please visit our Discord, where you could find an open forums where you can ask any questions to our KITE tutors. Also follow our Instagram and Facebook pages over here.